we start to lose weight, we start to feel better, reduce the amount of pain, particularly in our joints, and reduce the chances of these disorders that we talked about earlier in a previous podcast that causes all these diseases. Welcome to the Health Quest Podcast, your guide to God's will for your health. Hi, my name is Dr. Sal, and I've been a practicing surgeon for over 30 years, and my goal for each episode is that you'll be able to transform your mind to God's design for good health and to affect your lifestyle. If you're new here, we release a new episode every week, and if you enjoy the content, would you leave us a good review? It really helps our ratings and allows our show to reach more people so that they, in turn, can live a better life. Thank you for your support. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the immune system. So let's dive right on into today's Health Quest. Let's start off by understanding that the immune system has two parts. There's the part that does the initial attack, okay, and your immune system is like our military. So there's the part that does the initial attack, involving an insult, such as a bacterial or viral infection or even trauma. So the immune system is involved in traumatic events, and the objective there is to destroy the insulting organism and to eventually come back later, clean it up, and help to rebuild the integrity of the tissue, and then later on to build the so-called adaptive system. In other words, to build these antibodies so that in the future our body can recognize it early on, so that when we do get insulted by these infections, our bodies will recognize it and clear it out as quickly as possible. So how does this now involve the adipose tissue or the fat cells? Well, one of the things is that what we talked about in the last podcast is that the fat cells harbor these immune cells. And in the immune cells, you're going to find a whole host of different types of immune cells that are involved with every part of the immune response. So I want to bring that up because it's important for us to realize that as the fat cells enlarge, it starts to attract more and more of these immune cells, particularly the macrophages, which are actually the sentinels of the innate immune reactions, which is the beginning part of the initial attack. And they also fulfill a housekeeping task, as we mentioned before, where it basically cleans up after the destruction of the infection. We've noticed that in lean individuals, they comprise about 4% of these immune cells versus somebody who's developing excess fat, which goes up to 12%. So almost 3 times more of these immune cells in larger adipose tissue. And as I talked about before, we get these immune cells that migrate into these fat cells because as the fat cell starts to enlarge, then they start releasing these chemicals into the blood circulation, which then attracts these immune cells, such as the macrophages, into the fat cell. One of the other things that I want to mention is that once these immune cells, especially the macrophages, get into the fat cells, they can take on one or two forms, either the good form or the bad form. The bad form is the so-called M1 type, which secretes a lot of the pro-inflammatory chemicals or cytokines, which then also is detrimental to the organ systems around the body. It also helps to produce other hormones as well, which are detrimental, and we'll talk about that on a later podcast. Or it could transform into the M2 type, which is the good one, which now produces anti-inflammatory chemicals that get released into the bloodstream. The beauty of the M2 type is that it basically goes off and cleans off a lot of the cellular debris, which causes inflammation. Any dead tissue that we have in our body, the M2 starts to work on that. And so we can alter the way these macrophages work in the fat cell based upon what we eat. Now, we've talked about this before. A high fiber diet, where are you going to get your best fiber from? Your vegetables, your greeny leaf vegetables. It's always mentioned in the literature that it's best to eat it raw. Well, it's not always that easy to eat raw vegetables. I don't have a problem with you steaming or boiling them just a little bit and then sauteing them in a good, healthy oil, especially a monounsaturated oil like avocado oil or even an olive oil. Just don't use the extra virgin olive oil to cook at high temperatures. You could also use coconut oil, which is also good for you too as well. Sauteing it with things such as garlic and onions and using a little sea salt and pepper just to flavor it. Wonderful way to help switch these macrophages from the M1 type, which is the bad, to the M2 type. Also, consuming omega-3 fatty acids. That's right, the fish oil that everybody's talking about. It's always good to have a little bit each day, which helps to move and shift that macrophage into the better state, which is more the anti-inflammatory state. So these are some of the things that we can do. Again, always, like always, we always want you to stay away from the fast foods and the processed foods. Stay away from the wheat products. Dr. Cordain, in his book, The Paleo Diet, talks about if you're going to eat beans, get the dry beans and soak them, not only overnight, but soak them until they start to sprout. Once you do that, you alleviate all the lectins, and lectins are proteins which causes inflammation and allergic reactions that start in the gut system. And remember, we start damaging the gut, eventually it leads to leaky gut syndrome and allows for all these bacteria and lipopolysaccharides to get into the blood circulatory system, which irritates the fat cells, shifting more of these macrophages into the more detrimental state. So we want to keep a healthy gut. Again, we want to shrink these fat cells. Well, how do we do that? Folks, we think that eating a lot of fat is what enlarges the fat cells, but really what it is just an excessive amount of carbohydrates. Your refined sugars that you see in pop and cereals and a lot of the candies, especially even wheat, alongside with its gluten and gliadins. They also contain amylopectins, which are also the sugars, which keeps that insulin level elevated, as well as your blood sugar levels as well for a prolonged period of time. So staying away from the wheat products, staying away from the sugar products, introducing more of the fibrous foods, again, not only the vegetables, but also things like oatmeal. These are some of the things that help to improve. Also the sweet potatoes. Don't forget the sweet potatoes. They contain more fibrous tissue in it than your white potato. These, your omega-3 fatty acids, reducing your calorie intake, staying away from those in-between snacks. I don't have a problem if you snack. Try to have some more of the nuts. Try to stay away from the salted nuts. Buy raw nuts and eventually roast them yourself at home, and have a handful of that when you get a little hungry. And increase your exercise, even if it's just walking. This is going to also help to improve the balance of the good macrophages to the bad macrophages. And as a result, we start to lose weight, we start to feel better, reduce the amount of pain, particularly in our joints, and reduce the chances of these disorders that we talked about earlier in a previous podcast that causes all these diseases. I'd like to thank you for joining us on our show today. If you enjoyed our show, please give us a good review. And if you'd like any of the research sources in this episode, they'll be available on the show notes in the description. Until next time, have a great day and God bless.